All right. Hello, class. Thank you for those who have joined. Just to get started, as we have new people joining each week, I'm going to go over the ground rules for our live lesson. If you've been here before, they're going to be very similar. So every week, I'm going to have a little page of instructions up on the board for you to look at. And usually there will be some kind of greeting like, introduce yourselves, tell me what you want help with. You can participate as much or as little as you want for right now, but we always have to make sure that we're abiding by our 3R policy of respect, responsibility, and resilience. And what that looks like online looks different than what it would be in the class. So to be respectful would be to only post appropriate things in the chat box. To be responsible would be to make sure that you're focusing on your schoolwork when we are looking at a certain assignment. And resilience would be taking chances in answering questions, being brave in submitting something in the chat box, and always trying your best and not being afraid to fail. And so far, everyone who has participated in these has been able to do that. So I'm excited to keep this up. So because I am not a super big tech whiz, there's going to be mishaps, and that's okay. That's part of being resilient. But we are recording this for students who cannot make it. So just make sure that you're following the instructions as the whole thing is recorded. So if you are joining, make sure that you mute your microphone. And if you'd like, you can mute your screen as well, or turn off your camera. That way, then you can be an active participant without having to worry about what you're doing on the recording. Okay, so how we're going to do this is first, I want you to submit into the chat box if you want help with reading, writing, or grammar homework first. Whatever I hear the most of, then we will get started. So if that's reading, writing, or grammar, just type it into the chat box and I can see how I can help you. So Kaylin Fisher says writing. And I'll wait a moment for you guys to think about that. Hey, if you're joining this right now, I see a couple people coming in right now. Make sure to turn off your microphone. And if you'd like, you can turn off your camera and submit into the chat box what you want help with, if it's writing, reading, or grammar. Kaylin L says that the grammar has been giving her a hard time. I'll give you 15 more seconds to put in your vote. Trace, Mrs. Cass just asked a question about Google Meet. Is it possible to see the participants like we can in Zoom? At this time, I have limited that, so people aren't seeing each other. They can just see the presenter. That way we can focus on the work. But I'm sure there is a chance that you can do that. I just don't have it set up. All right, so I heard from Kaylin Fisher first, so we are going to start with the, okay, so Kaylin can see people. It probably depends on your own settings. All right, so give me an okay into the chat box if you can see the screen where it says hello class, just to make sure we're on the same page. Just type okay or yes, I can. Thank you, Star. Thank you, Kaylin. Thank you, Kaylin. Thank you, Ryan. And thank you, Tracy. All right, so let's start with writing and then we'll move on to the other homework. So this week's writing response, hello, Miss Gracie. This week's writing response was a little different than previous weeks. Okay, so you should be seeing the writing response number 7. Type into the chat box right now if you can see the writing response number 7. Okay, seems like the majority can see writing response number 7. Okay, so how this works is I can't see your chat responses when I'm on the writing response screen. So you can send in questions to the writing response as I'm working on it and explaining it. And then when we're done explaining the response, I'll go back to the chat screen and go through the questions to see if I answered them. I might answer them along the way, but if I don't, then I'll cover any questions I didn't answer at the end. So when we're doing writing responses, just to keep in the same rhythm as any other time if we were in the class, make sure that you are putting your name and your teacher and your period, just because it helps me when I'm seeing that to clue in that you're in third period or I have you, or if I print these out, which I have on occasions, this just helps me out a little bit to know what period you are and where to put it in the grade book. So we always make sure that we are filling out all the necessary things. Seems tedious, but at the end of the day, it does help. All right, so your prompt for this week was to write a CER paragraph, CERER paragraph with evidence or quotes, or you can write a short story with dialogue, still using quotation marks, and you get to choose your own topic. So this was left up to a lot of choice for you guys, which just means that you could have written about a lot of different things. And we actually gave you some topic ideas right here in case you're like, Mrs. Smith, I don't want to think about what to write about. So this was some ideas for you. So if you wanted to take the route of writing a CER paragraph, you could do a like, what is your favorite this, or this is better than that type of response. Or if you wanted to get creative, you could write a short story using dialogue, which is our grammar point for this week, what we were practicing with quotation marks. So in the chat box right now, tell me if you'd like me to give an example of a CER paragraph or a short story. Let me know if you want me to practice a CER paragraph or a short story. Okay, I've heard from 2 people short story. You guys are going to make me work for it. All right. All right. So first you need to think of your topic with a short story. So I am going to write a short story about, someone give me an idea in the chat box, anything. Give me a setting, a character, a problem, and we'll get started. Caitlin wants me to write about food. So Star, if I'm writing about Marvel versus DC, that would be a CERER paragraph, deciding which one's better. So I'm going to go with Kaylin's idea of food. So I'm going to write about what grocery store food thinks about when they are in the store. So this is similar to a couple weeks ago when I had you guys pick an inanimate object to write from their perspective. So I'm going to write a story from the perspective of someone give me a grocery store item. Something you can buy at the store. Cheese. I heard cheese first. Okay, we're going to go with cheese. So if I'm taking on the perspective of cheese and I need to write a short story, which is about at least 6 sentences, I'm going to start with describing its surroundings. So I sit in the line with all my other cheese friends, examining the tall humans looking down at me. I wonder why it takes them so long to think about what kind of cheese they want. So I'm introducing what the cheese is seeing. They're seeing the humans trying to pick cheese. And now I need to insert some type of quotation mark. Now, cheese doesn't typically talk, but in the short story, we're going to make it talk. So if cheese could talk, what do you guys think a cheese would say to a human to get them chosen? It's kind of silly, but think about what would a piece of cheese think about or say to a human to get chosen? Caitlin says, I taste the best. Jackson says, I'm cheesy. I like that. That's funny. Punny. All right. Let's embed a lot of different things. Okay. So I'm the cheese. So I'm going to say, I say to the woman looking down at me. And remember, with quotation marks, we need to first put a comma using the comma rule for quotation. Then we need to put our first quotation mark to signal this is what the cheese is saying. And I'm going to combine a couple of you guys. I'm going to start with Jackson's comment of, I am so cheesy. I am the best flavor around. Please take me away from this grocery store with you. And I end with an exclamation mark. So then I then put a quotation mark, and that's the end of my sentence. So look how I embedded the quote into a sentence. The sentence was not only the quotation mark, but it also had a description beforehand. So that's what it should look like for a quotation mark or for quotation marks. And then I'm going to continue on with the woman's reaction to Cheese talking to her. The woman dropped all the bananas she was carrying because she looked in shock, and I am not sure why. Had she never heard Cheese talk before? Next thing I know, she fell over and everyone in the store surrounded her. It looks like I am not being bought today. Ta-da! That's the end of my short story. Okay, so that's all you have to do. You have to create a funny story if you choose to do a short story, embed a quote, and that's for those of you who want to take a more creative approach. If you're like, that seems way too hard, I just want to write a CER response, argue whether or not you like Coke or Pepsi, okay? Then you can embed some quotes from articles online. But you need to shoot for at least 5 sentences, and if you're doing a short story, it must have quotation marks. All right, so I'm going to look at the chat box and see if there are any questions. Do you have any questions about how to complete the writing response after that, or does that make sense? Submit a question or say, I think I get it now, or something like that. All right, I don't see any questions, so I'm going to assume you understand it. So should we do grammar or should we do reading next? Kaylin F says grammar. Jackson says grammar. And Ryan says grammar. Okay, so the grammar, let's talk about it for a second, and then Star will move on to reading. So you guys were assigned no red ink this week, and it was about quotation marks. So one of the unfortunate things about no red ink is I can't actually get into the questions like you guys can see it. So I can't project it on my screen. Let's talk through quotation marks for a second. So I'm going to go to the bottom of this writing response. And I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of what quotation marks look like. And then I'm going to give you some wrong. I'm going to give you some sentences where quotation marks are done wrong. And you guys tell me how to correct it, okay? First, I want to hear from you guys. Give me a sentence where you think a quotation mark is embedded. So that means a sentence with a quotation mark. And then I'm going to write it out and we're going to talk about whether that was right or wrong. So I want to see one brave soul. Give me a sentence. Kind of like the, I say to the woman looking down at me, I am so cheesy. I am the best flavor around. Please take me away from this grocery store with you. Come on, let's be resilient. Oh, yay. Thank you, Kaylin. Okay, as I was walking in the store, I heard Cheese talk. Okay, let's talk about that one for a second. So as I was walking into the store, need to look back at what you wrote. I heard Cheese talk. All right, so there's one big problem that I see with this. Thank you, Kaylin, for being brave. I appreciate it. But let's talk about it. Why is this considered not a quotation? Does anyone know? As I was walking into the store, I heard cheese talk. What's the big problem with that sentence? Why is it not a quotation? There's no quotation marks. That's the first thing Jackson notices. But why is there no quotation marks? Was anything directly being said? Was anyone talking? There's no dialogue. Nice job, Kaylin L. I like that. Yeah, there's no dialogue, which dialogue just means when someone says something out loud. So how can we change this so there can be dialogue? I like this start. As I was walking into the store, comma, I heard cheese talk. What do we need? We need dialogue. How do we put in dialogue? Who should we have talk, the woman or the cheese? The cheese. Okay, so let's then say, I heard cheese talk. The cheese said, and what do we need after said? What punctuation mark? Do we need a period, a comma, or a question mark? We need a comma. Nice job, Kaylin. All right, and I think someone gave me something to say. Kaylin L says, take me. I like it. Take me. All right. And then quotation marks. So this is a complete sentence with a quotation in it. Now, I want you to notice a few things that are important, and this is probably what's tripping you up on No Red Ink. First thing to notice is the comma. We have a comma right here to signal that we're changing from describing the setting to what's actually being said. So that comma signals a transition. Then we have quotation marks. We have quotation marks at the beginning and end of what is being said. So that's important. If something's actually being said, the quotation marks must surround it. Think of it as like parentheses or two bookends. It must be on the beginning and the end of what's being said. But what do we notice about the actual quote? What's significant about in the dialogue? When it says take me, what do you notice? Particularly the word take. What's special about the word take that's different than a normal sentence? I hear people thinking. Look at the word take. What's it start with? Yes, Ryan, you got it right. It starts with a capital letter. So notice how the T is capitalized, even though it's not at the start of the sentence, and take is not a proper noun. So why is it capitalized? I talked about this last week in the live lesson. So if you watched that, you might have an idea. But someone explain to me why the T is capitalized and everything else isn't in that quotation mark. It's the beginning of dialogue. Nice job, Kaylin. And Jackson, you're right as well. It's the beginning of a sentence. Yeah, it's a sentence within a sentence. So when we look at take me, this is a sentence within a sentence. So let's highlight it blue. And so we have to make sure that at the beginning of a sentence, just like as, it needs to be capitalized as such. So, oh, I just turned that letter. Okay. Give me a sec. Yeah, so just like as, we also need to capitalize take. And so take me then ends also with a punctuation, the exclamation mark, and then we put the quotation mark. That signals the end of both of our sentences. Okay? Does that make a little more sense after that explanation? How's everyone feeling? Give me right thumbs up if that makes sense. Give me right and thumbs sideways if you want another example, or give me thumbs down if none of that made sense. And I mean in the chat box because I can't see your faces right now. Just write thumbs up, thumbs sideways, or thumbs down. Ryan gives me a thumbs up. Kaylin L gives me a thumbs up. Jackson puts thumbs up. All right. And Kaylin gives me a thumbs up. All right. So it seems like that example made a little bit more sense. If you have more trouble with this, feel free to send me a private message on Google Classroom, and I can give you a few more examples. All right. Let's move on to the reading, our last thing. If you just came in for writing or grammar help and you'd like to leave, feel free to leave the chat. If you'd like to stick around for the reading homework, then you are free to stay. All right, so we're going to start with the central ideas and inferencing reading for this week. So once again, if you have questions as we go through, submit your question at the end, or submit your question as we're going through, and at the end, I will answer the questions. So there's been a couple people as they're doing this that they don't put their name at the beginning. So if you don't put your name, I then have to track down your email to figure out who submitted it, and that can take a while. So if you want to make sure that I'm getting your response, make sure to put your name. So let's get started. I'm only going to do one example for central ideas and one example for theme, and then you're going to be on your own for the other two. So this passage says, day 4, when the internet first became popular in the United States, Wi-Fi was not an option. Computers all across the country used phone lines to connect to the internet, which was known as dial-up internet. In hindsight, there were lots of problems with dial-up internet, but at the time, it was the only option many people had to access the internet. Dial-up internet required an open phone line, so if someone's parents were on the phone, then getting on the internet to do homework would have to wait. When someone called, the internet connection was often lost. Once internet service became popular, a lot of people had trouble connecting and would have to wait to log on to the internet. While there were many drawbacks to dial-up internet, the benefits outweighed them at the time. All right, so our focus for this passage is central idea and inferencing. So central idea. Someone described me in the chat. What's a central idea? What's it do? Why do we have it? Why is it important? Kaylin L says it's the main idea. That's a good way of putting it. So central idea just means the main idea. Or I like to think of it as what's it all about? So when someone says to you, what's that mean? Or what was the main point? They're just trying to signal what was it about? So it's kind of like a summary of the main idea. So when we're looking at this first question, it asks us just that. What is the central idea of today's passage? So what we're going to do is I'm going to read through all 3 responses. And in the chat, you're going to tell me what you would answer. So you're going to say 1, 2, or 3. So what is the central idea of today's passage? 1, wireless internet is popular today. 2, dial-up internet had its flaws but was still useful. And 3, there were many downsides to dial-up internet. All right, send in the chat. And it's okay to be wrong, okay? So just because everyone else says a different answer, you could be right. All right, Kaylin F says 2. Kaylin L says 2. Star says 3. And let's see, who else is here? Ryan, what's your guess? And Ryan says 2. Okay, so we're between 2 and 3. Let's chat about if it's 2 or 3. All right, so what is the central idea of today's passage? 2, dial-up internet had its flaws but was still useful. Or 3, there were many downsides to dial-up internet. So if we have to think about what the main point is, we need to think about what is being talked about the most throughout the whole paragraph. So what's interesting about number 2 is that it talks about dial-up internet, the entire, it's focusing on the fact that it has flaws, but it's still useful, where number 3 is just focusing on the downsides. Now, if we look through the whole paragraph, does it have any positive or useful traits that they talk about throughout the whole paragraph? Is there anything that it mentions? Kaylin L says yes. Kaylin, do you want to put in the chat box what's a sentence that points out that it's still useful? Or a positive of dial-up internet? Someone can jump in before Kaylin L too. The last sentence. Okay, let's read the last sentence. While there were many drawbacks to dial-up internet, the benefits outweighed them at the time. Yeah, I think that's a great example of what they were thinking through about the usefulness. So if I were to look at this, I think the main idea is the fact that they want you to realize that while dial-up internet did have some negative outcomes or some flaws, it was still useful at the time. So yes, I would agree too, but if you answered 3, you were almost there. This is kind of one of those trick answers where it's kind of right, but there's a more correct answer. All right, number 2, what inference can be made about phone lines? So remember, inference is like, what can we assume or what can we take away from what they're saying? So what can we guess or what can we take away about phone lines? 1, you cannot use the internet and make a call from the same phone line. 2, the phone lines were not connected to the internet. Or 3, you could use the internet and make a call from the same phone line. So this is something that's not directly stated in the text, but something we can assume. So tell me in the chat, 1, 2, or 3. Okay, so for number 2, 1, 2, or 3. All right, I hear some people say 1 and some people say 2. So let's talk about it again. 1 says you cannot use the internet and make a call from the same phone line. And 2 says the phone lines were not connected to the internet. All right, so this one's a little more tricky since we are having to assume something about the paragraph. So let's look at it and let's see if we can use the text to inform our answer. So for number 1, you could not use the internet and make a call from the same phone line. Let's look. Computers all across the country used phone lines to connect to the internet, which was known as dial-up internet. In hindsight, there was lots of problems. Dial-up internet required an open phone line, so if someone's parents were on the phone, then getting on the internet to do homework would have to wait. When someone called, the internet connection was often lost. Okay, they had trouble connecting. So what did we learn from this passage? What about phone lines and the internet? Is number 2 true based off of what we read? So based off of the response, I would say that 2 isn't true because the phone lines were connected to the internet. It just wasn't a secure setup. So it wasn't secure or strong enough. That's what I'm saying. So I would say it's 1 as well. All right. And what you're going to do for number 3 is just like Kaylin did earlier, you're going to use a quote from the passage to support it. And you're just going to type it in there and then submit. Are there any questions about that? If I don't hear anything? All right, so there's no questions about that. So that's what you're going to do with all of your readings. You're going to read the passage and then make your best guess. But the good thing about this is if you get it wrong, it's okay because this is based off of participation. So I don't want you to stress about getting every little answer correct. This is about practice. So by trying and participating, you're improving just by getting some repetition put in. So any final questions that you guys have, or are you good? All right, if you are good, then you can log off and I'll see you later. If you have some more questions, stick around in the chat box and you can send it in. If not, you can log off. Bye, Kaylin Fisher. Bye, Kaylin L. Bye, Star. All right, Linda, how you doing? You can turn off your, or you can turn back on your mic if you'd like.
Okay, that was great. I was trying, I'm not used to this, so
No, you're fine.
I was typing you a message just now, and I don't know if it was working or not, but you